Hi and welcome back to MDriven 1000 Steps program. So this is chapter 14 and we're going to shift the focus a bit to discuss this cloud connection dialog up here. But first let's see what we have. We have selected persistence XML and we start the system, or rather we can start it with the local turnkey debugger. We restart the turnkey server and we get a browser with our application. Whenever we do things here, this data, where is it stored? Well, it's stored in an application or an XML file next to our model. So whenever I go to this directory, I would expect to find an XML file called the same name as the model, .prototypedata.xml. And if I open that with Notepad, I will see that there's an XML file describing the parts of the model, but also describing the data within it. So here's an image as byte array data. Yes, but this is good for development and when we only have little data, but we pretty soon want to be able to store a lot of data and also have multiple clients and users using the same data set. So in order to do that, we're going to close this one and we're going to go to the cloud connection dialog. So the cloud connection is where we can connect to an MDriven server that has our data in the cloud. But before we do that, we can actually install an MDriven server locally and also a turnkey server, much like the prototyper. But in order to get those installed, we're going to download them. So these will take a minute to download. And whenever we have them downloaded, we want to add a server pair. Why it's called a pair is because it will instantiate a server for MDrivenServer and one for turnkey server. I'm going to do a server pair. So this is server pair 1. And I'm going to, now the download is finished. I'm going to refresh this install in server pair 1. And it says it will be restored to this location. So I'm going to take this search path. In a file explorer like this, and then I see that I've gotten a folder for server pair 1. So this is the corresponding to this one, and also I got these downloads made today, and those are the downloads made by this button. So I can refresh that So the good thing about downloading to these files and have that separated from the server pairs is that I can have multiple server pairs. I'm going to add another server pair 2, and I'm going to refresh the install on that one as well. So refreshing install doesn't mean that I need to download it from the MDriven server or from the mdriven.net site. It's just copying the local files that are available here already. So I'm going to refresh this install, and what happens is there's a server 2 catalog created. So that's the server 2 catalog, and that contains one MDriven server and one turnkey server. And the MDriven server is a lot of .NET Core assemblies, and also the MDriven turnkey is a lot of .NET Core assemblies. So these servers goes in pairs, and I'm going to switch to server 1, and I'm going to start that pair. What happens is there are two black command windows, one starting the MDriven server, this is the one with the MDriven server, and one starting the turnkey server. And I can see that one of them has the localhost 5000 address and one has localhost 5001 address. So no two servers can use the same address, because then they won't start. Being here, I can always just press start and they will restart if they are already running. I can then go to server pair 2 and start those as well. And this one is 502 and 503. I'm going to close those like this. And I'm happy with server pair 1. When we have a server like this, we can say that we want to use this MDriven server in server 1 as the active MDriven server. So how I would go about that is either typing in the address to this MDriven server and its password. So I could either go like this, and the password to an MDriven server installed like this is like before, A and 1 2 3 4 5 6, and then I can check that it's alive, and you say never started, no current version. So that's what I expect it to say. So that's one way of pointing out the active MDriven server. Another way would be to just push this button, use above MDriven server. So whenever I press this, this is updated, and also this is updated. If I go to number 2, this has different port numbers. So if I do start servers and use, this one is updated to 2, and this one was updated to 2, and I can check the value of those. If I stop the servers for server 2 and I try to communicate them with check server, I get a timeout and an error because there's no one there to listen. So that's expected. going here and use the one from server pair 1, which has port server 5000. That has switched to 5000 here and also here, so I can always check where I'm gonna communicate. So what is it that I want to do when I have an MDriven server? Well, I want to upload my model. So what's my model? It's all this and also all the view models that we have defined during this course. So I'm gonna upload this model to the server. And I will give it a few seconds and then we'll check, and then it says uploaded by me because I'm logged in as Hans, and it says database recreated. I also want to do this one, update server-side jobs, and we haven't created any server-side jobs, so that was expected that it said nothing here. So what we have done now is established a place to store data in a database rather than in an XML file. So this will be better to work multiple users towards this MDriven server. So the MDriven server has a web interface that we can address by visit it like this, and you log in with A 1 2 3 4 5 6, and we can see if we go to running and model that there's a model uploaded at this point, and it's gonna run against a built-in database, and the database was recreated or created when we uploaded it. That means that if we go to this option, data in A0, we will see all the classes that we have added to our model, and we can also quickly see data within the database in this interface. So remember that this is behind protected by a login, even if we are now working locally, so we don't care that much about having a strong password or a strong user. So I'm gonna search, and we see that there's no data in here, and that's also expected because we actually had data in the XML file, but we created a new database and there's no data in the database. If we would want to move the data that we had locally in the XML file into the database, we could do so by using the tool called migrate. So I'm going to start the system from the XML file, and I'm going to push this migrate button. So this will download the data from the XML file, or load the data from the XML file and store it in a migrate file. I'm going to do that first. Where do you want to store the migration file? Migrate to DB. So now I have all the data from the XML file in a migration file. Now I can switch the persistence to the MDriven server, and that has taken the settings from this dialog here that we just were in, and I'm going to start the system against the MDriven server. And then I'll push the migrate again, and then I'm gonna read a migration file and write to my MDriven server persistence. So migrate to DB, here's the data, I'm gonna open that, and then it says that it's done. It created 24 objects and 22 relations set, and I'm gonna save all those changes done to the MDriven server based persistence, and I've done that. Having done so, I can head back to the MDriven server and search for cars again, and I see that the cars that I had in my XML file are now available in my MDriven server. So I can double click one of these, and I will double click the brand of the car and see that images and also the data that we have provided is available via the MDriven server. Having done this, I can now, so while now that we have an MDriven server going, we can actually choose to start the prototyper, the turnkey prototyper, towards that MDriven server instead. And if we restart this one, we see that we get an error. The sys singleton has multiple instances. Good. This was unexpected, but it can happen, so let's deal with it, as we have this issue now, and you will probably too. First, what does it mean? Well, this singleton class sys singleton, if you remember from earlier, we have gonna close this for now. We have a class called sys singleton. This class is marked as being a singleton, following the singleton pattern. And the singleton pattern states that there can only be one instance of objects of this class, and the framework ensures that this is the case. So what apparently has happened is that we now have gotten us into a situation where this is no longer true. There are two instances of this sys singleton, and that's not allowed. So that's why it complains. So how did this come about? Actually, it's a known issue that it can happen while using the migrate function. Because what happens is that we spool out all the objects from the place we migrate from, and then we spool them into the place we migrate to. And this function doesn't currently check that we or doesn't know how to handle the fact that there might be a singleton instance already in the ones that we are spooling the objects to. And in that case, we will end up with two objects of this singleton that only should be one. So how do we fix it? we can start the system and open the debugger, and let's take just one expression, and we can find the sys-singleton and get a select expression for this. So I'm going to select all instances of sys-singleton and see that the error report was correct. We have 2. None of these are especially important to us, so I'm just going to go ahead and I want to remove 1, so I'm going to select that to M1, or rather, yeah, actually we're going to select, we're going to open a seeker for the sys-singleton, because this has a built-in delete button, so that's better for us. I'm going to select that one and delete. Now we have state to save, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to head back to this one that had the issues and hit F5 to refresh it, and now it works as before. Forces us to log in on this one. Good. So what are the main differences running this system against an MDriven server versus an XML file? Well, for starters, there's whenever we do changes to the model now, that expands what we need to be able to save to the database. The database schema must be updated. So our world has turned a little bit more complicated, but the benefit is that it endures more load. So as an experiment, we're going to add a new class, and we're going to go to the cloud connection again, and we're going to upload this updated model that has a new class. A class will be represented as a new table in the database. I'm going to upload the model, and when I now check server status, I see that the MDriven server has extended the schema for us, so that we now can store data to class 1. And this is something that we will need to do whenever we do major changes or changes to what data is available in the database. So adding a few attributes and uploading that model, and the MDriven server is responsible for altering the tables, altering this table in this case, adding these 3 attributes. If I were to press delete on these, and upload the model, I see that the MDriven server drops columns in the database. When I drop things from the database, that means that data will disappear if there was any. In this case, we didn't have any data, but that's okay, because if we don't have the attributes, we don't want the data. So this will also work for associations, etc. So when we do an association like this and upload the model, we see that there are indexes created and table are altered, and a foreign key is inserted to represent the implementation of this association in the database. But I don't want any of this. This was just an experiment, so I'm going to delete the whole class 1. And upload that model. And see that it has dropped all the things for me. So this is the normal work of a DBA to database administrator to maintain the schema of the database. But we only ask you to maintain the model, and the MDrivenServer can maintain the schema for you. To learn more about the MDrivenServer and its uses, go to the wiki mdriven.net and search for MDrivenServer. So MDriven. Yeah, actually you will find a link here. So there's information about how to install it, and you can install it on Azure, a web app in Azure, or a virtual machine, or a physical machine for that matter on IIS. And once you have it, you can then set it up to talk to your own database, an external database with a connection string. So that's a core part to get the application that you build with MDriven to scale and to be transactional, safe, and multi-user friendly. Okay, we will wrap up chapter 14 here. Thank you for listening.